Okay, so today's daf yomi is daf Bava Metzia daf lamed Bava Metzia 30. We're going to start on the top line. The Mishnah said, "Shotcha l'tzorcha avalo l'kvodo." And you could spread out the blanket for its own needs, but not for his own honor. Meaning to say, if you have the lost item and you need to shake it out, you could do it for the carpet's needs, for the blanket's needs, but not for your own needs. When like your guests come, you show them you have a nice blanket. That's not appropriate. So the Gemara asked the question, let's say you want to spread it out for both your own needs and for the carpet's needs. What would be the law? So the Gemara says, Tashma shotcha in. So we say that you spread it out for, it says in the Mishnah, you spread out for its own needs, which means l'tzorcha in. For its own needs, you could spread it out. Ha'letzorcho doesn't the implication that if you want to do it for its needs, for his needs, u'letzorcha, and for your needs, low, you wouldn't be able to do it. So isn't that the implication? The Mishnah says, but the next clause states the opposite. Ima seifa, but the next clause of the Mishnah says, you can't spread out for your own needs, which means l'chvodo hu for his own needs, it's not appropriate. But if you'll be doing it for its needs and yours at the same time, it would be good. Chap your dummy. You can't derive a clear proof from the Mishnah. So therefore, the Gemara says, Tashma, well, let's try and bring a proof. You're now take this carpet and spread it out on a bed or on a stake. On a stake. They know how to spread it on the bed or on a stake for its own needs. But you can't spread it out on the bed and on the stake for the needs. You can't spread it out for his needs, but you can spread it out for its own needs. Let's say guests came. That if the guests come, and so then it would look like it's also for your needs, you can't spread it out at all. So doesn't this proves, therefore, the Gemara is suggesting that if you're doing it both for your needs and its needs, it's not going to be okay. The Gemara says, no, Shani Has in that case is different. The Mikla Kalila, that case is different because the guests could ruin it, because they would ruin it. Imisham Eina, Imisham Ganli, either because their eyes would give it the evil eye, or because we're going to be concerned that maybe they would steal it. So Tashma, the Gemara says, let's try and bring a proof again from the following case. That now Rashi says this next case is referring to the law of an Egla Rufa, but Tosfos says it's referring to the case of what's called the Para Aduma. The Egla Rufa is if there's a dead body found outside the city and you don't know who killed him, you take a calf and you kill the calf in a wadi. That's called the ritual of the Egla Rufa, but the Para Aduma is where you kill the red heifer. And it's relevant to this week's Parsha because we're doing Parshas Para this week. So in both cases, both the calf that's broken and the red heifer, which is slaughtered, and you take its ashes and you mix it with water, both of them, the animal is not able to have a burden on it. So let's say let's say you take this either the Egla Rufa or the red heifer and you put it in a harness. Vidasha, so you put it in the harness in order to nurse with its mother, and then it ends up threshing with the older cows. Then we're going to say it's kosher, it's still kosher, even though it threshed, because it was in the harness only with the other cows. Let's say you put it in bishvil shatinok fetidosh, but you put it in for both purposes, not just to nurse, but you put it in also to thresh, then it's disqualified. But here we say that if you put it in for the same, for its needs and your needs, and it says it's disqualified. So the Gemara says, no, Shani Hasan, no, that case is different, because there it's based upon a verse, because it says, the Amar Kra Sharlo Uvadba, that you have not worked it, which means Mikomakom, that it can't have done any work. Well, if that's the case, if it can't do any work, well, then the first clause should also be a problem, because in the first clause, it did work. So even that case should be a problem. Gemara says, no, Holo Damya, The first case is comparable only to a different case. You actually you didn't care at all if it did any work in the first case, because that's similar to the case that we go into the Mishnah. The Tanan, we went in the Mishnah, and it states that if a bird rested on it, share it's going to be kosher. Allah, the meaning to say if the ego arufa or the paraduma had a bird resting on it while it was out there in the field, so then that doesn't disqualify it. But Allah allows zachar, but if a male mounted it, then it would be disqualified. My time, like Papa taught. Iksiv uva oved iksiv, that if it would have just said in the pasuk ubad, Vikarina and ubad, if it just said ubad and we read it ubad havamina fil memela, anything that happened, even a bird resting on it. Iksiv avad vikarina and avad havamina ad avad ba'il. He himself would have had to have done the work. Hashud avad vikarina and ubad, be'ina and ubad dumya avad. We need that the work done similar to avad. Meaning to say, we want him to have wanted it to be done. In this case, in the first case of this Mishnah, since we didn't want him in the brisa, since he didn't want the calf to thresh, therefore it's not going to be disqualified under those circumstances. So now we had said in the Mishnah, the clay kesef, clay nachoshesh mishtamesh ben, that you're allowed to use the silver and the copper utensils as long as you don't ruin them. If you find a wooden utensil, you're allowed to use them because if you don't use the wooden utensils, they're going to rot. If it's a copper utensil, then you're allowed to use the copper utensil in warm water but not on the fire. You're allowed to use it with hot things, but not on the fire, and the fire ruins it. If it's a silver utensil, then you're allowed to use it for cold of a but not with warm, because the heat will blacken it. Magrefos v'kardomos. So let's say you have that this is like paddles that are used to clean out the stoves, or basically this is kind of like the way I imagine this is like a peel, which is what they use to put the matzah into the oven. So they would use it, Rashi says, either to clean out the stove, the ashes, or else to separate the figs from each other. Vikardumos and these axes. Mishtamish b'hem barach. You could use them with something soft, because that would be okay. Won't ruin it of a little bit kasha. But now it's something hard, because the hard things would ruin it, would dent it. If it's a gold or a glass, don't touch them until Elijah the prophet comes. And now the Gemara tells us the same laws relate to someone who's watching a deposit as it relates to somebody who's watching a lost object. Meaning you can, just like you can misuse a deposit, you also can't misuse a lost object. So the Gemara says, well, I don't understand, but because of Mayavidasagabe, why is he even touching the deposit? The guy who gave him the deposit, if he wants to maintain the utensil, let him come in and do the maintenance on it. The guy who's watching it shouldn't even touch it. So the Gemara says, they were talking about a deposit where the owner went overseas, and so therefore we need the person who's watching it to do maintenance on it. Let's say he found a bag or a sack or something that it was not be according to his honor to lift up and to take. That he doesn't have to take. So meaning to say that the law of returning a lost object doesn't apply if it's something that the person who finds it wouldn't pick up on his own. What's the source? The Tanna Rabban, it says in the Brisa, it says in the pasuk, you're not allowed to look at a lost object and hide from it. But there are sometimes you do have to hide. Sometimes you're not allowed to hide. Okay, Tzad, how do we understand this? Let's say he's a Kohen, and he's in the cemetery. Then Kohen's not allowed to go into the cemetery to get the lost object, so he should hide. Or if he's elderly, let's say it's something that the elderly person or the scholar would not typically pick up, not appropriate for him to pick it up. Or let's say you're a surgeon, and now they want you find some straw, and you have to go pick it up and return it. You would have made 50 times that amount of money. that day. So therefore, you're not required to do it. Therefore, it says that there are some times you need to hide and sometimes you don't. So the Gemara says, for which one of these reasons do we need a pasuk to actually teach us this halacha? Which one of these reasons do we actually need a pasuk? If you want to say if you want to say to teach us the law of the Kohen, and when the object is in the cemetery, it's obvious that the Kohen isn't required to go into the cemetery. He's not allowed to go in the cemetery to get the object. Say the idea of returning a lost object is just a positive commandment. Hashev tishivim. Whereas the Kohen becoming Tameh is a positive and a negative. Kadoshi has to be holy, Kadoshim you, and also L'nefesh lo yitamah. So it's a positive and a negative commandment. And even though Rashi says there's also a negative commandment by hiding from a returning lost object, that doesn't override another negative commandment, but it's only a positive commandment can override another positive commandment, but not if it's a positive commandment and a negative commandment. Positive commandment can override a negative commandment, but only if there's no positive commandment associated with that negative commandment. So the Gemara says, and the next case, and furthermore, the Gemara says, furthermore, the prohibition of the Kohen Gadol is a prohibition. It's in Isura. We're not going to override this prohibition because of somebody's monetary needs. What about the fact that you're saying that his responsibilities, if his work is worth much more money than this other person's work, you're not required to give up your job? Well, I'm a Rav. We learned that out. We learned that out from what Rav Yehuda Rav taught, because Nafkadam Rav Yehuda Rav Efes. It says in the pasuk, you have a chavyon on the top of 30b. There will be no poor in your midst, which means shalcha kodem l'shel kol adam. Then your needs come before everybody else. So therefore, what is it referring to? So rather, it refers to the case. What do we need the pasuk for? For the idea, if a person is a scholar and it's not according to his honor. That's the idea, that if he's a scholar and according to his honor, the pasuk says you are allowed to hide and you don't have to return the lost object. Amar Rabba hikisha chayev. But Rabba says that once he actually engages with the lost object, meaning to say, if the elder was not according to his honor, if he strikes the animal to get it to move, that shows an interest in it, and now he's responsible to return it. Abai have a Yosef Kamei the Rabba. Abai was sitting in front of Rabba. He saw that there were some goats standing there. Shakal Kala, Mishadabu. He picked up some earth. Rashi says it's muta. It's like a clump of earth, and he threw it at the goats. Amrway Yechav Tabahu. He said, now you're have to deal with them. Kum ahadrinu. Get up and return it. So here's the question. Let's say the elder would return this if he would be in the field, but not now that he's in the city. What's the law? Do we say hashava ma'alya ba'inan? Do we say that you need to do a real returning? V'kivan the lav darke la'achzer be'ir, and so therefore, do we say hashava ma'alya ba'inan? Do we say that that we require a complete being able to return it? Hashava ma'alya ba'inan, that he needs to do the best way he can return it. Meaning to say the Torah requires that it actually reaches the owner of the kivan of darki la'achzer be'ir. And so since he wouldn't have to return this in his city, therefore he doesn't have to return it. Well, he's not going to be obligated even if he's in the field. But right now he's in the field and he's obligated. And so since right now he's obligated and he's in the field, therefore he has to return in the city. So the Gemara says, we'll leave this question unresolved. Amar Rava kol she'b'shalo machzir b'shel chavero nami machzir. So Rava says anything which Kolsha b'shalom machzir, anything that if he's an elder and if it was something of his own that he would find on the street, he would pick it up and bring it back to himself. Then for his friend, he's also obligated. But Kolsha b'shalom porek v'toin, and now we have another law of unloading and loading, that you're obligated to help your friend. If you see your friend with packages, a donkey, you have to help the donkey unload and load up the donkey. So anything that you would do for your friend, for yourself, then for your friend, you also have to help him. Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yossi was once walking along the road. So he met a man. He was walking along the road, and he met a man that he was carrying a pile of wood. So he sees the man is carrying this pile of wood, and so Osfinu become mispach. The man sees Mishmal Rabbi Yossi is a cute story, and he puts down his wood and he rests. So Amar Lei, so the man says to Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Yossi, Daliwi, now help me lift up the wood. So Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Yossi says, Kama Sham, and he looks at the wood. He says, how much is the wood worth? He says, Palga de Zuz. He says, the wood is worth half a Zuz. So he says, Yaivle Palga de Zuz. He says, I'll just give you the money. I don't want to be bothered with this. So the man took the half Zuz, the Afkare. Then Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Yossi said, I don't need this wood, so he declared it ownerless. So then at that point, Hadar Zachar Bahu, the man comes and takes the wood again. So now he says to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yossi, help me lift it up. Hadar Yav Palgizuz, he gave him another half a Zuz. The Afkare, and again he made it Hefker. But now Chazia Da'ave Kabayla Mehadar Mizkebu, he sees that the man is coming back to make it to pick it up again. He says, no, I'm not falling for this trick again. He says, L'kuli alma afkarinu, v'lacho afkarinu. He says, to everybody else to the rest of the world I made it hefker, but to you I didn't make it ownerless. Gemara says, Umi ave hafker ki agam. Is this really, or can you really make something ownerless in this manner? Well, Tanan, Beis Shammai says, we learned in the Mishnah in Peah that Beis Shammai says hefker le'aniyim. That Beis Shammai says if you make something ownerless just for the poor people, that is considered hefker. Beis Hillel eno hefker achi hefker aniyim la'ashirim kishmita. The only way you have the ability to declare something ownerless is if you declare it ownerless for everybody. Or Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi l'kuli alma afkarinu. But b'milsa ba'alma u'de'ikmei. So the Gemara says that Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi made it really ownerless for everybody, but he just declared that it wasn't ownerless for this person because he was trying to just say this with words, but it was just like he was trying to bluff his way around it. Mara says, but why does Rabbi Shmuel Bar Rabbi Yossi think he keeps obligating himself to lift up this wood? But Rabbi Shmuel Bar Rabbi Yossi, Zakin, he was an elderly person, he was a scholar, he shouldn't have been required to pick up the wood. The Gemara says, Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi, it's true, he wasn't required, but he acted beyond the letter of the law. But we should note that even though he acted this way, the Rosh writes in the 14th century, the Rosh writes that a Torah scholar is not allowed to be strict upon himself to return the lost object because he's being mezalzo in his Torah. He's disrespecting the Torah. And if somebody wants to act beyond the letter of the law, he should do like Rabbi Yishmael and give them money. So therefore, the Torah scholar shouldn't lift it up, but he should just pay them money. So the Gemara says, what's the idea that you should act beyond the letter of the law? How do we know that there's the law? The law is what you're required to do. Beyond the letter of the law is what you should do. How do we know that there's such an idea? So the Gemara says, the Tani Rav Yosef, you shall make known to them, so that this teaches us that you should learn a craft, so you should make money from it. Es haderach, the path, zug milut chasadim, that you should follow in the ways of kindness. Yalchu za bikur cholim, you should visit the sick. Ba zukfura, this is burial. Betamasa za'adin, this is judgment. Asher ya'asun zulifnim mishur sadin. So basically, this means you need to act beyond the letter of the law. Yalchu za bikur cholim, this refers to visiting the sick. So what's the difference between that and acts of kindness? I know gmilos chasadim. Isn't this an act of kindness? Gemara says, "Lo nitzracha ben gilo." No, it's teaching us that you also have to obligate somebody who is, and that you need to visit somebody who's also from the same like zodiac sign as you do. Amar that if you are from the same zodiac sign, ben gilo no tel echad mishishim bechalyo, that if you find somebody who's sick and he comes from the same sign as you take away 1/60th of his illness. And nevertheless, even though you're getting a little bit of his illness, you still have to go and visit him. That you should warn them the Torah and the ways that you should go on. Yeah, sure. This refers to burial. So the Gemara says, "Hainu gmilos chasadim." Isn't this what's the difference between this and acts of kindness? The Gemara says, "It refers to an elder, and it's not according to his honor." Asher Yasun, that means to say he's still obligated in burial. Asher Yasun, this refers to beyond the letter of the law. Rabbi Yochanan says, why was the temple destroyed? Only because they went and they adjudicated cases according to the laws of the Torah. So the Gemara says, what do you mean? The temple was destroyed because they judged by the laws of the Torah? Meaning to say, what does that mean? What kind of laws are they supposed to do? They're supposed to do like the other laws? Rashi has a little bit of a different girsa, but anyway, he says the Migzita Guzaya Danin Beisurim Ubechazaka. This refers to the Guzai who judge with force, and that is a similar word Rashi says in Mamakama, meaning to say, well, what's the problem with judging by the laws of the Torah? Ela ema she'emidu dineim al din Torah below avdu if the mishur sadin, that they never acted beyond the letter of the law, and so that's why the temple was destroyed. Now, even though the Gemara in Yoma Daf Tes gives a different reason why the temple was destroyed, and that was because of hatred. Now you need to say both things caused the destruction of the temple. One was hatred, and also they didn't act beyond the letter of the law. That's what Tosfos says. Hava hagarma, and you could say that the two things are connected. Sinas clean and baseless hatred and not going beyond the letter of the law are both basically coming from the same idea that you're not willing to give of yourself for others. Okay, so what is the Mishnah? We'll just have time. We'll do the next Mishnah. Ezu aveda. What's a lost object? If you see a cow or a donkey grazing on the road, that's not a lost object because that's what they do. And let's say you saw a donkey, but the saddle's upside down. It's in the backwards way. You see a cow running between the vines. That's a lost object. Somebody finds an animal, if you see a lost object, you return it 4 or 5 times, still have to keep returning it. If when he returns the lost object, he was losing his work, which is the equivalent of a selah, then the person who returns it can't say, give me a selah. He only has to pay him. How much would he normally pay a worker to engage in this type of work? If there are 3 people there, he can stipulate that he wasn't going to return this object unless he'll get his full salary. And if he has nobody to make this condition in front of, then he doesn't have to return the lost object because he'd be losing money. The Gemara says, what do you mean these are the lost objects, the cow, the donkey, or the cow? What about all these things we've been discussing in our chapter? What is something that's recognized as a lost object and you have to return? What is something that it's there and without the knowledge of the owners? If you find a cow or a donkey grazing on the road, that's not a lost object. So the Gemara says, okay, do you really want to say that if you see a donkey or a cow grazing, it's never a lost object? Is that really the case? So I'm remembering the Marav ad Shloshim. If you see it up to 3 days, it's not lost. The Gemara says, hey, Chidami, what is this talking about? If you're seeing it at night, even 1 hour, it's also lost. If it's during the day, it could even be more than 3 days, it's not lost. Gemara says, no, we see it prior to dawn or right after sunset. Tasiyomi, Amrina Nisrumi is Shami Levanafka. We say that the owner doesn't know. If it's 3 days, the owner basically took it out and didn't bring it back. But Tafe more Vade Avedahi. It's certainly lost. And Tanya Nami Achi, Matzatalas or Karadum. Basically, if you find a cloak or an axe by Isratia in the path, like the road, Upararata Ben Akramim, or a cow running amongst the vineyards, Arezu Aveda, that's a lost object. Talis Bitsad Gader, Karadum Bitsad Gader. Let's see if you find the talis next to the fence or an ox next to the fence. Pararoa Ben Akramim, or a cow running between the vineyards. Ezu Aveda, that's not a lost object. 3 days you see it, then it's a lost object. If you see the water coming into his fence field, he should put up the fence so the water doesn't destroy the fence field. From the fact that the Brisa says that you have a cow grazing for 3 days, that's a lost object. That proves that when the Gemara says that the cow grazing in less than 3 days, it's not a lost object, but more than 3 days, certainly a lost object. Okay, we'll stop the daf here and we'll pick this up, God willing, tomorrow.